pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Ask Commissioner Daly to open tonight's proceedings with a thought or prayer.
I don't have any nice fancy thoughts, so we'll just start with a prayer in just a second.
Should we have a round of applause for our returning commissioner?
Welcome, Gina. Welcome back.
Thank you.
So nice to have you back.
It's good to be back.
Our dear Heavenly Father, we thank Thee for the opportunity we have to gather together as citizens of this fine city to discuss the important issues and to learn and discuss with each other. We thank Thee for the freedom that we enjoy and for the ability that we have to participate. We ask Thee to bless that we can remember the citizens of this city and our decisions and remember to keep the best interests of the community in mind. We ask You to bless that we can always be cordial and civil, and we can remember that our unity is what gives us strength. And we say these things in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Commissioner. And we welcome back Gina. It's been a few weeks, months. It seems like months, but we're grateful that you could be back with us, Commissioner Hurst, and I trust everything is well at home. And
Yes.
that's great. We will begin tonight by going through the minutes of our last meeting. This would be the minutes of the meeting from our meeting held on September 28th, 2016. We'll just go through this page by page. If any have comments, make note of those. Page 1. Page 2.
I have a comment or an edit on line 36. Considering discussions regarding the city's vision for the west side, Commissioner Wright said she would like to ask the applicant to make the pole in a way that it would be hidden or less noticeable. I didn't actually ask the applicant, and so I think the main thing was the vision for the west side and also the nearby residential dwellings. So if we could, and I have a hard time remembering exactly how I said it because I was a little bit fuzzy with sickness that night, but if we could include the words, considering discussions regarding the city's vision for the west side and the nearby residential dwellings, Commissioner Wright asked if it was possible to mitigate such a significantly taller pole, and then the same thing, in a way that it would be hidden or less noticeable. And then Lisa responded, to that question. So, and then I said, well, then I, don't want to ask that or anything. I don't think I was asking that. So.
Okay. Did you get that, Marcia? Anything else on page 2? Page 3? Page 4. I have a proposed change on lines 27 and 28. And I believe, Corey, you were speaking, so I guess it's up to you whether we make this change as well, but where we say, the council directed staff and the planning commission to review the flag lot allowance, I would rather say ordinance there.
Yeah.
And then I would take out the words consideration to rescind or prohibit. So it would simply read, review the flag lot allowance and to consider rescinding or prohibiting flag lot configuration in any type of subdivision development.
Correct. That would be correct.
Is that okay?
Flag
Yep.
lot ordinance, yeah.
Ordinance.
Yeah, with the ordinance change, right. Anything else on page 4? page 5. I noticed that we're missing a space between paragraphs. Just for consistency, we'd probably want to put a space between lines 2 and 3, or move line 3 to line 4, I guess, just to create that space. And then down on line 12, situations such as Martha's Place may have driven confusion. Could we say created confusion rather than driven?
And you want may or just have?
Let's see, as Martha's Place situations have, or may have created, yeah, probably may have created confusion regarding multifamily use. We okay with that change?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Anything else on page 5? Page 6, again, another space between lines 3 and 4, or move 4 down to 5.
Sorry, we went a little quick over 5.
Okay.
So on 47, Commissioner Wright added that requesting or desiring the city to remain the same and never change is not only unrealistic but also dangerous. So then it says later.
I'm sorry, which line?
Sorry, 49. Let's start on 49.
49.
She said she does not want tons of change, but the city cannot pretend things will not change. I may have said it exactly like that, but I'm gonna propose a change to that. I would say something along the lines, she's not wanting the city to completely change, but the city cannot pretend things will not change, and we should instead manage change, is what I was trying to, the thought I was trying to portray, is that we need to manage change. Basically, it's not going to go away, and if we don't manage it well, then things will change, and if we don't manage change, then it's a problem. That was what I was trying to say, and I didn't really write down exactly what the amendment there, but something.
So to summarize, that first clause, she said she does not want to see a lot of changes, or what would you say there?
I don't know if we should
Drastic change?
Yeah, drastic change would be
Drastic
good.
changes, but the city cannot pretend that things will not change, and we need to manage those changes appropriately.
Yes, perfect.
Any problems with that edit on 5? Anything else on 5? 6? And Marcia, did you get the spacing on that paragraph? Okay. Anything else on 6? 7? Thank you. Chair will entertain a motion.
I move to accept the meeting minutes as amended.
Second?
Moved and seconded. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
I'll abstain from voting since I wasn't here.
Okay, and Commissioner Hurst abstains. Thank you. The next item on the agenda is scheduled for a public hearing. It's the consideration of the proposed zoning code text amendment to add a new business use of storage climate controlled, including but not limited to Chapter 12.12 definitions and Section 12.48.080 South Main Street Corridor Overlay District Zone, permitted and conditional uses by specific district. Turn some time over to staff.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As you recall, the commission directed staff at our last meeting, so you've met a couple of times on this issue. But you wanted us to evaluate some ways to look at climate control storage. As you discussed the matter, on September 14th, we talked about some various options, and the commission directed staff to prepare the ordinance and notice, as you have read, for an option that uses or capitalizes on the South Main Street overlay zone and the North Gateway district of that corridor plan. Just by way of recalling it, we did advertise it so that we identified the area that we amended, but there may be some subtle edits that have to take place in the zoning ordinance, so we said various sections so we could cover that. I know Lisa, I wasn't able to talk with her before publishing this report, but I know that she thought there might be a couple other places that if you go this direction would need some edits, and so I left it noticed so that that could take place. But just kind of recalling back, as I recalled, you were discussing not broadly casting the ability for climate control storage to be in all commercial high zones. And so we needed to look at a way to accomplish that. One of them was the overlay. In looking at the ordinances and this area, particularly the Parish Square, staff realized it's part of the South Main Street overlay. So it was, rather than try to create a new zone, this seemed to be a place to capitalize on it. So we've provided you first a definition of climate controlled storage, which we're trying to make distinct and different than just outdoor storage and the typical storage places you see with the roll-up doors and people put in their boats and things of that nature. That this would be a small type of storage with individual units, and so we needed to call out a new definition to try to talk about what that intent is so that we understand the differences of the types of storage. And that climate controlled really is a small individual storage type in a larger facility, having access to smaller places, but we didn't want the storage of vehicles, industrial equipment, and things of that nature in the facility. So we provided that definition to try to narrow that. Typically the ordinances say such as, it was really hard to come in and say, okay, here's our definition and then here's the different types of uses. Climate control storage is pretty specific to its own category. Then we went into the North Gateway. As you can see on the proposal, I've grayed out the existing language that's in the North Gateway. Just a reminder, the way the construct of the ordinance works is the North Gateway has a sub-zoning district that is in place. In this case, you have two areas. You have a CH and a CM in this north area. The Parish Square is in the CH. And so all the uses in the CH zone are continued, even though the overlay is in place. That base zoning is in place. Then there is some additional uses. In the concept of the South Main Street, there was a substantial focus of introducing residential uses into mixed sector or mixed use type concepts. And so you have the permitted, the conditional of the underlying zone. Then you have this density associated with potential residential uses. And then if you look throughout the district, we added a few uses like general restaurant and so forth. What this proposes is to add a section D where this would now go to, okay, here's our North Gateway District. You're part of the overlay with this exception or alteration of the ordinance. And it's being called out that the exception or alteration of the overlay is specific to the Parish Square Shopping Center. And so the Parish Square Shopping Center now is called out as an exemption. What does that do by default? It basically puts the gateway on the south side of Parish Lane now. Instead of the three corners, it's now down to the two corners. The Parish Square now would be not part of the additional fabric of the corridor. The consequence to that is it takes away, it still allows the underlying uses, but it's taking away the corridor plan concept. That's moving the buildings, the architectural areas of the buildings. This is the idea that Parish Square under this exemption would look more like Parish Square that's in place today for its long future than moving towards the direction of the corridor plan. So it's taking that out. It leaves it in the Parish Lane design guidelines though. So the design guidelines run from Main Street to Legacy on Parish. So all of your Walmart development, the right development out front, your Sonic, your Beans and Brew, Jiffy Lube, they were all developed under that Parish Lane Design Guidelines. That remains intact, so you're not losing and no input on design, you're just defaulting it to the Parish Lane Design Guidelines. And then it has, of course, the permitted and underlying zone of the CH for the Parish Square, calling out a reminder that's in the Parish Lane Gateway area. And then we have number 4, D4, climate control storage not exceeding 10,000 square feet. And I think that's where you debate 10,000 square feet, is that sufficient? Should be a little bit more. Just as a reminder, CH zone allows uses from 10,000 to 50,000. So we drafted it on the minimum end of the CH zone. So hopefully that explains that principle of how we created a specific area and carved it out with the overlay zone to the Parish Square area. And so I tried to write the report with the consistent with our reviewing of the zone text, outline the arguments that I see that are in place, still listed the pros and cons that you heard at the last meeting regarding, and then I tried to at least create for you some draft findings to assist you. Part of this was the discussion that Parish Square has been basically substantially redeveloped in its existing footprint. There'll probably be a long time before that would change. Tried to tie it into the need for services. There's probably some need in the market for climate control storage, and just tried to provide some basic findings for you. So that's how we've prepared it. Unless you have specific questions, we went with the option of the overlay as directed by the commission.
Thank you, Corey. As I reviewed this, I guess the thought occurred to me of the unintended consequences of rolling it out of the South Main Street corridor guidelines. And I didn't see a lot of that, and you've touched on it a little bit tonight, but if, for example, someone were to come in and just sort of demolish the shopping center as it currently exists now, what could be built there under this scenario?
Everything in the CH zone.
So residential?
Residential is not available because this would exempt it out of that.
So the residential component is gone from that?
As this is drafted,
As
yes.
this is drafted. That's what I wondered.
So it'd be just your
So it'd
CH
just be a
zone
commercial
uses. And that's why it was important to call out in E for, or 2E, what is it subject to? It's exempted from the corridor plan provisions for those additions, so it's subject to the general regulations of the CH. You've got your permitted and conditional uses, you're subject to the design standards, and then you have the added conditional use to it. So it really is, in essence, returning that shopping center to the CH zone it was before the South Main Street corridor was created.
Which would be the same zone as everything to the west of it.
Well, you have what do you call it? I'm missing the word tonight, tongue-tied. We transition to CVH just shortly down the road.
Just down the road.
Yeah. By the time you get past the Smoot building, now you're into the CVH zone.
So it's right next to to what's already there.
Right, right.
Okay. So we're not creating something that's new along Parish.
No.
In fact, we're reverting to what's already mostly along Parish.
Correct.
Okay.
This would be kind of in a way to return to the original CH zone, but add the climate control storage specific just to the Parish Square.
So a follow-up question to that, why did we put that corner in the zone in the first place?
I think it's a combination of things. I think the first perception that I would recall was when we hired the consultant to talk about the Main Street study, the Parish intersection became a focal point. And that focal point was the North Gateway. And there was a lot of discussion during the study of reconfiguring the intersection, considering roundabouts on that intersection, which didn't pan out in the long haul, considering tabletop to the intersection, pedestrian, and the concept, I think, that also played into it is you had over-grocered. It was known that we were over-grocered. Now, over-grocered is a relative term. We're over-grocered to the national market, but we're pretty typical of the local Utah market for groceries. In Utah, we buy a lot of groceries. And so there was some discussion centered around, I think, we'd either had notice or understood that Dick's Market and Associated Foods were considering closing stores. Would it be a viable option to keep grocery as a component to that area? And so it was determined that if and when that went away, which was kind of the general census trend, since the corridor plan was looking for 15 and 20 years, there was an idea the neighborhood plan had an R8 zone in that area. So all of the homes that are facing Main Street from the bank to the back property of Dick's Market is an actual RH zone in this general plan for that community. So the idea was we'd transition that as part of a gateway and mixed use because it had a substantial amount of land to create that. We've seen subsequently the city's resistance, and I try to use that respectfully, to be aggressive with multifamily and redevelopment. And we've also seen since that adoption that Associated Foods closed the one store on Pages and remodeled that Dick's Market, and probably does a different life for the next 10 to 15 years than we originally envisioned.
Thank you. That's helpful.
Can you review the conditional uses that are allowed on the South Main Street corridor on 2B that it would then not be allowed to have on Parish Square? Because am I right in assuming that if you then remove it from the South Main Street, then those conditional uses on that table of uses would not be applicable for that?
No, the CH zone has its own list. If you look at it, conditional uses is shown in the table of uses for the respective underlying zone. So in this case, whether it's that statement or the new statement, the CH conditional uses are maintained. What you don't have is this C. C is now the mixed use concepts. That would go away for Parish Square. C would go away. But you would add, and this is where your debate is it conditional or is it permitted? You would add an additional conditional use in the CH with Parish Square area only being the climate controlled. I don't know if I'm making sense, but your conditional uses stay in place with the CH zone regardless.
There are no specific conditional uses specific to the South Main Street?
There is with the density.
Just the, yeah. Okay.
And now that density wouldn't apply.
Okay.
Because residential wouldn't apply.
Right.
So it's essentially boiling it down, it's removing residential from Parish Square.
And returning it back to the original CH zone plus climate control storage.
And then it wouldn't also not be subject to South Main Street, their design standards.
Correct. It would be
Can
only
you
to
sort of review the difference between those and the Parish Lane design standards, just briefly?
Sure. The Parish Lane is focused on primarily Parish Lane and any large project associated or visually connected to Parish Lane. And the design guidelines are trying to upgrade some color and architecture issues, trying to add some pedestrian amenities into the project rather than your standard cookie cutter, here's how much landscape, here's how much parking, and here's your building setbacks. We tried to get into public amenities, additional landscaping, street lamps that you see along like Walmart, some rock materials as a sub base and a primary base to the other materials. And so we get more into the building design under the Parish Lane design guidelines. So you got your standard bulk area, setbacks, sizes, plus a little bit of aesthetics and some cohesiveness through use of materials. But it didn't change the fundamental setback issues.
And South Main Street's more of a form-based.
Yeah, South Main Street now is not your traditional bulk area with some design standards. It is now a form-based, and we're concentrating, in addition to some uses, we're now concentrating on moving buildings to the front of the street and framing the street with the buildings, setting multiple story expectations, and how the buildings will be treated in materials in that. And because that's an aggressive, where you're minimizing setbacks now and tucking parking behind, which you're not doing under the parish lane design
Yeah, you can't even
guidelines.
do that right there.
Yeah, now we're on the form-based, and this is a concept has been kind of used against me. Form-based in principle is less worried about regulating uses and more worried about the design. So form-based in its truest form says you can do anything you want in your building except something extremely dangerous. Because we're not worried about your building, its use, we're worried about how it relates to the public square and how it frames the streets. And in exchange of that, we either lighten up on the use list, which we didn't really do in our form-based code. We didn't lighten up on the use list. We still stayed fairly traditional with the use list. But in exchange for an aggressive form base, we started reducing expectations in total landscaping. We started allowing shared and mixed-use parking. We started integrating residential into the commercial use list.
Yeah.
And so you have a very aggressive change in the development pattern in form-based than you do the traditional zoning district.
Great, thank you.
Any other comments or questions for staff? Would invite the applicant to come forward and give us your thoughts on the proposed ordinance that's been presented tonight. Mr. Tate.
Thank you, and I'm glad I made it. It was close.
Please state your name for the record.
Steve Tate with Parish Square LLC. I appreciate the conversation that you've had about what we've requested. I think that this suggestion that Corey has laid out makes a lot of sense. I think what it does for us as a developer and a property owner in the city is it takes us out of that South Main Street, which helps us so that our, as we consider future planning for that project, we've been really nervous about the overlay, frankly, about having to potentially pull buildings out to the street, and it would make it economically impossible for us to do it. One bit of information that would be helpful, I think, is that the performance of that grocery store has been tremendous. I think I mentioned before, average grocery sales per week in the state of Utah are about $330,000. And that store does considerably more than that on a weekly basis. And Associated Foods found that, they had two okay stores before, and that the consolidation has been tremendous for them. They've been very happy with it. We've been happy with it, and our tenants have done well. So this change, we're very grateful for the accommodation if it goes that direction, the city council were to approve and you were to approve it. Our long-term plan, and I can tell from some of the questions that long-term planning always has to be something that you need to consider. If I could do what I wanted with that project, and mind you, I'd not only have to get consent here and from the city council, but I'd have to get it from AutoZone, from our existing tenants, from Albertsons, who still owns the real estate where Dick's is. I'd have to get it from Dick's. There are a host of, you talk about uses that are not permitted. I've got a host of non-permitted uses within our leases and our development agreement. But our long-term plan for that, frankly, would be to pull that set of U-shaped shops up towards the front of Dick's Market so that it really looks more traditional with a grocery store and some shops. The only way we could do that with parking would be to eliminate the Little Caesars building, and I would relocate that in some way. Little Caesars is a really strong performer.
Isn't that
there.
like the strongest Little Caesars in, I thought it was like in the top 5 of the
So
nation.
what it is it's in the top 9% in the nation
9%.
for volumes. Now, that is a really good statistic, and we're thrilled with it, but when I talked to them about it, I said, well, so are you thrilled with it? And they said, yeah, it does good. And I said, well, really? Because why would you say that? And he goes, because it's a good store in Utah. Utah is like Little Caesars' #1 market. They kill it in Utah. So apparently their store on 56th West and about 27th South in West Valley is their top store. And if they're happy with our store and they're thrilled with that, and we're in the top 9%, I mean, I think their cost is like a quarter or 5 cents on a pizza. So when you sell it for $5, they're really happy about it. And I don't think it's any surprise, frankly, that Domino's came over to try to pick off some of that from their other location over on Pages. But again, if I could paint a perfect picture, I'd take down the Smoot office building, if I could buy it. I would move Little Caesars onto that parcel, and I'd build them a new building so it opens up the sight lines and view corridors, improve that landscaping. We pull that whole U-shaped set of shops up to the front of about where Dick's is, and have a much more traditional, do some really cool architectural features on the building. It would really be nice for Centerville, and with taking us out of that overlay, it allows us, I think, to do that and not have to worry about pulling anything up to the street. So that's more information, and I think traditionally in a planning commission meeting you don't want to deliver more information, but I know it's on your minds wondering what's going to happen with that long term. I don't know if that will happen, but I've already done some drawings to see if it would feasibly work. The economics are really tough to make that happen, really hard. So if we can somehow make it happen and go through the consent process with our tenants and our development partners and with the municipality, then we may consider it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions?
Helpful. Questions for the applicant? Think not. Thank you.
Thank you.
This matter has been scheduled for a public hearing. We'd like to open the public hearing at this time. Anyone wishing to speak on this matter could come forward at this time. Seeing no one rushing forward, I'll go ahead and close the public hearing. Any further questions for staff or the applicant? Hearing.
I have one.
Yes.
Maybe this was covered and it's probably for the applicant, but the 36 inches of space on the west side, the unit that you're talking about, how long has that been empty?
CrossFit was there, and they just left and went to Craig Salmon's building on the west side. That's been,
Okay.
I think, in only about 30 to 60 days. So we haven't felt a ton of pain from that recently. But before and just so you know, we bought the shopping center about 2.5, 3 years ago. And the guy that sold us the shopping center opened that CrossFit as the business because he couldn't fill the space. It had been a quilting shop that 15 years before, it had sat vacant that long. So for him to develop some revenue, he opened CrossFit and invested $100,000 into that business just so he could create an income stream on that space. And we would have loved to have kept CrossFit, but the ceilings weren't high enough. And Craig Salmon's building is like 22 feet clear height, and it's wide open, free span, custom build out, and it was for less money. So I don't blame him for leaving. I have marketed that space for the last probably 8 to 9 months with our brokers and with myself, and we have not had so much as a knock on the door, a phone call, anybody that has shown interest. We've taken it to, urgent care centers. We've taken it to collection agencies for like a small call center type use. I don't even think that's approved, is it, Corey? We've gone to every possible use we could think of to try to fill that space. And outside of, we tried to get GPP Fit over here to relocate there, to get runners off the streets and keep them in the back. We've talked to them, but nobody. And all the professionals that I talked to in our business, I'll ask them what they think, and it's funny because everybody tells me the same thing. Gosh, you got to do some storage in there, some climate-controlled storage. So,
Any other questions for the applicant? Okay, thank you. I'm going to put forward a motion, then we can discuss any amendments. But I think we might as well get a motion on the table at this point. I would move to recommend approval of the proposed zoning ordinance amendments regarding climate control storage as written read in the report and highlighted in the report. For the suggested reasons for actions A through E in the staff report.
I'll second that.
Been moved and seconded. Any further comments specific to the language or to the proposed ordinance?
I had maybe a comment and a question, I guess, anyway. So, part of the discussion in the staff report is the exemption of the Parish Square Shopping Center from the South Main Street corridor plan, which I think makes a lot of sense, even though it maybe kind of, in a way, touches Main Street. I don't think most people think of it as Main Street. It's Parish Lane. It's a different type of a thing. My thought is if we maybe need some type of reason for action or finding F that might cite that as a reason, or is that just kind of overkill at this point? Kind of saying something along the lines of, Parish Square is more aligned with Parish Lane than Main Street. That's why we feel okay with taking it out of
Oh, yeah, I think
Main
that's
Street.
something you can add.
I like that.
I like
I
it
like
too.
that too.
So are you going
I don't know how to wordsmith it though, but
You want to make an amendment to the motion that we add additional
yeah,
condition or additional
Finding.
yeah, finding F, yeah, exactly. So I would move that we amend the motion to add finding F, and I guess we'd say the Planning Commission finds that the Parish Square Shopping Center
It's more closely
More
related
closely
to Parish
aligns,
Lane than
yeah.
it is to Main Street.
is more closely related to Parish Lane than it is to Main Street. Great.
I'll second that amendment. Do I have to do that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Any further discussion on the amendment? Let's go ahead and take a roll call vote. Commissioner Johnson, or Commissioner Daly, sorry.
Aye.
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 And we should note for the record, and I'm sure you have, Marcia, that Commissioner Johnson has recused himself. Correct, Commissioner?
Yes, and at least that I was just in the
Well, I just wanted to make a comment that I think this is a great solution to what we were worried about. We wanted to allow this possibility of business to be in our city, but we also wanted to prevent this from becoming a huge part of our city, more than what we wanted. And I think just exactly what I was gonna say exactly what Kevin said, not as a finding, but it makes sense that Parish Square really does not really relate with the Main Street area, but instead more with Parish Lane. And I don't think that by doing this, it really will affect the design standards, because we still have Parish Lane design standards. And in fact, it may be able to free up some more development for the developer, just because it removes some of those form-based design standards. So I think overall it's a really great move forward.
Thank you. Any other comments on the main motion as amended? Bring the matter to a vote. Go ahead. Did you have?
I was just gonna say, I completely agree with the changing it so that it doesn't have that South Main Street corridor overlay on it, but I think the climate-controlled storage is strange in that area. I missed the I missed the last meeting that it was talked about, but can we maybe just discuss that for a minute?
Well, I was going to say, so at the first meeting that we had about this, you know, one of the primary concerns with the, well, so the main reason for this is there's not a lot you can do with the, you know, frontage of 36 inches, right? You're really limited on stuff. And so this is an option that can be put in this facility, in this area, that works well for that facility. One of the things that was definitely a concern, and Commissioner Wright touched on this, is that we didn't want it to become like all of the old dicks on Pages Lane take over, and it almost is, for lack of a better word, like a weed, right? It's not a weed, but anyway. And so it's almost like I feel like this is a good option for something that can come into this area and can stay here long-term, be something that is consistent. It won't significantly change by adding it into like a corner in this case. And it doesn't have to necessarily be the corner, but by limiting it to 10,000 square feet, you kind of are saying it's got to be the corners.
So when we talk about 10,000 square feet, it's total. So he's got 4,200 and 4,400. I mean, that's about the only space he could have.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, I guess you could do up to 10, so you would do some of the others, but that's,
right.
You could do a lot more with that, more front stuff than this back corner. And so, in my opinion, it feels like a good fit for a way to make use of an otherwise difficult situation. And again, the long-term type of nature of it, once you build it out for climate-controlled storage, it's probably going to stay climate-controlled storage for a long time without taking over the whole area. So.
Well, and the other thought that I had too is it's not, climate-controlled storage is a little bit different than just a storage, just any old storage place. It's going to be, from what I recall, just open during regular business hours or extended business hours. It's not going to be an overnight thing where you have people accessing it at all hours. In fact, it will be something that will be more similar to the businesses around it. People would still be able to be accessing the storage via the back, but then that will actually increase people back there, which will free up some of the less than desirable things that occur behind places like that, which the neighbors in the back, residential neighbors, were in favor of. And then having something that is, have you ever been to Lock It Up, across from Smith's in Bountiful? It's not a lot of movement. It's not going to add a lot of traffic. It's not going to add a lot of that in the area, but it will allow business to continue, and in a way that it's not, I think, doesn't really harm the area.
Is the access going to be solely from the back, or will they still have access through that 36-inch?
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I'm sure you've already addressed this.
The plan is to just have access in the back.
Okay.
I don't want people grabbing a hand truck with a couple file boxes running through the front. I think that my other tenants wouldn't appreciate that. Okay. So the access will be through the back. We may widen that door a little bit so that you could get kind of a hand truck through there a little easier. There's a dock on the back, so it's kind of convenient if you pull a truck up to unload. Like Commissioner Wright said we would limit the hours so that it's not a 24-hour access. Okay. So it's more traditional business hours. That's our intent. That there may be cases, I have to say that there may be cases where somebody may call or request a late night pickup or something, and I think we would accommodate that on a case-by-case basis, but to have it general business hours. The intent also with this is, I think that when people hear storage, there are a lot of images that go through our mind, and the first one is, behind the railroad tracks around the corner, really nasty garage doors and dust everywhere. So that isn't what this is. This is more where you may end up with some high-tech equipment that has to stay within certain temperature ranges that is stored. Files, we think that the clientele that we'll mainly work with will be local residents and then maybe some local businesses. So an attorney's office that has to store files, that keep them here. You may come down with your Christmas tree and all that stuff from the winter. January 3rd, you show up and you rent a small thing that keeps it climate controlled year round, so it's not in your basement or something like that. A lot of our tenants in the shopping center have already told us that they probably lease some of that space from us because it's pretty inexpensive, that they may get one of these interior units for themselves just so that they're not storing stuff and paying retail rates for it. I mean, it's kind of obnoxious to do that. So with giving them an option, I think that kind of hopefully that gives you an image of what we're trying to do.
So so you don't want to have access from the front at all?
I don't think so. I think that it would be somewhat detrimental to our other tenants. I mean, Forget Me Not Salon just opened, and it would be right next to her hair salon, and I don't think she wants to have people hauling boxes or something in there. I think we would be much better off to keep the access just in the back. It also keeps the parking. That lot around dance start to let out times, you've all been there. Empire's busy in the dance studio, moms are dropping kids off. And I think it will help a lot with our parking to keep all drop-offs and pick up stuff in the back of the building.
Thank you.
Thanks.
The other thing that was mentioned in the earlier meetings, Commissioner Hurst, was the fact that this is there is quite a bit of demand for this right now. And our concern was not to open it up so widely that we became the new capital of storage in Davis County.
I was gonna say, you're right, that we have the 10,000 square foot limit, so otherwise I think it would be a concern as well that it become the whole building eventually, so.
Any other comments or thoughts on the motion as amended? Let's go ahead and bring it to a vote. Commissioner Wright?
Aye.
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 Motion passes. We'll send the recommendation on. Thank you, Mr. Tate. We welcome back Commissioner Johnson. Almost. Okay, we'll move on to the next item of our agenda, which is also been scheduled for public hearing. This is the consideration of the proposed zoning code text amendment for Chapter 12.36 Table of Uses Allowed to allow a reception center in the IH Industrial High Zone. Turn the time over to staff.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The applicant has requested the city, well, kind of back up, they'll probably give you the background to it, but they have an interest in leasing a building in our industrial park. It's the South Industrial Park. So if you think of the waterscape area on the corner that now is the Lawn Butler, that's kind of on the south end of our city in the business district. They'd like to acquire that building. I think I've got a picture. If it's is that the right one?
Isn't this on the north end?
No, this is south.
South end.
So that's the,
Did Raw Energy Gym move?
I don't know who was in there personally, but it's been vacant for a while from my understanding.
It was a title company.
Oh, you're right.
It was the regional title company for Stewart Title.
Okay.
They did their back office stuff there.
So they're interested in that specific building, and it's located in our industrial high zone. And so you're in a situation where you have to go through the table of uses, and reception center use that matches their business model is not currently allowed in the IH zone. So even though they're interested in a site, staff is to remind you that this is a consideration of a use list change for the IH zone, and you're looking at it that it would be added use in that district. And are you okay with that? And looking at the review procedures for that. So let me pull up in the staff report here. So we provided this report for you to discuss. It goes through the text amendment standards. Generally, even though they're listed in the same category, text and map amendments, in a text amendment, you're really tied when you talk about a text amendment and look at the ordinance, you're tied to looking at the general plan. You certainly can look at it from a broad perspective. You know, what's the suitability of this district? How does it affect this district? Is this a use that we can envision happening within the IH zone? And so I provide to you look at the goals and objectives of the city's general plan. Just to be fair, I think I provided two options for you to look at because I think it does have a debatable consideration for you to look at. In general, in our general plan, we want to provide quality local services and provided the personal and business services for the community. So how does reception centers work into that? Certainly it can be a local community use, and the patrons being able to use a facility for their personal use or their life uses in there and services. The issue of defining high quality is a really large debate. What is it high quality? High quality is a need for a service. High quality can be a job or a company with good paying jobs. You could determine high quality in a number of ways. We also looked at our West Centerville neighborhood plan. In the general label of it is the best use of the land is for the planned highway, commercial, light industrial, manufacturing uses. That's a generalized statement about the West neighborhood community. That policy was developed a long time ago and remains in the general body of the general plan. We had a significant debate, and I think at the council level, and share it just quickly with the Planning Commission. The issue came to light in discussion of the Bowling Engineering rezone issue. Well, if you have a statement that says this and you have a statement that says this, what does it all apply? And staff had taken the position on that was the specific Pages Lane area talk specifically about Taylor Elementary. And so that's where you tie in your guidance, even though there might be some overarching policies above it. I think the position here is we have some overarching policies, but we also have a West Centerville neighborhood plan. And that should have some weight to it because those are specific written policies to that neighborhood and may have some differences or different ways of looking at it. But these are the policies that are more primarily used to make your decision. What's in the neighborhood plan? What does it actually say? We do say in our goal to enhance the Centerville Business Park District. That's two different areas. You have the North Park District, north of Parish Lane. If you turn to 1250 West, you'll see that quick sign there. We have the South Park District on the other side of the theater, and we're in that South Park Business District. But they're labeled as the Centerville Business Park District in our plan, those two areas. We want to preserve the economic viability of an aging development. It's critical to success. The concept that some of that's driven out of there is that we have some underutilized ground. We have some uses that are not necessarily the most wonderful aesthetic uses when you have gravel and rock and equipment stored next to Wild Arrow. They kind of have a disparity between maybe what they're doing, but we want to preserve the economic viability. We have a lot of metal buildings. We talk about trying to upgrade those, but yet still keep the metal buildings because right now we only allow the concrete block or similar material. And so we still have some work to do in how we handle this business parks district, particularly the north sector. That's probably more in difficulty of underutilization and not in great shape as the south district really is, I think, a pretty successful little node of industrial uses there. I think what's interesting is there's an objective, limit land uses in the business park to light manufacturing, office, professional service, and specialty retail type uses. And so I think that's a debatable place. We want some light manufacturing, we want some professional services, we want some offices, specialty retail. That was driven out of Wild Arrow specifically. Specialty retail became driven of Wild Arrow wanting to locate there.
Was it added at that time?
Specialty retail was a new definition.
What is Wild Arrow?
It's archery center,
That's what I
archery
thought.
range. So there was some discussions in that plan. So I think you have to look at reception centers is, where does it play into it? So we talk about the vitality of an aging area. We acknowledge their argument that there's been a vacancy in that building for a period of time. We acknowledge We have a lot of office and professional uses, particularly in that south. It's not like we're struggling to get those type of uses there. There's a lot present in the area. And so I think the debate is does this create a imbalance to that goal? We talk about the permitted versus conditional. That's always a discussion. What does it mean? Should we move it conditional? As you're aware, the long debate about conditional uses is there really permitted uses, but you have an opportunity to mitigate some problems, but always treat them that they're basically allowed uses. We looked at the other zones that are allowed, and we do have the CVH. They're permitted in the public facility high, which I think our public works building is public facility very high, but this would be like a high school where elementary is a low, a park's a low. I think elementary is medium, a park is a low. And we do have them as already in other areas in the city permitted. And so, you know, there's kind of this hierarchy. You move permitted uses into the next intensive category generally, unless you're separating uses in that category. And then you introduce sensitive uses in that category with conditional use. Then you jump those up into a permitted and introduce sensitive into the conditional. And we're up into the industrial high. And we have, that's our prominent zone out there, our most intensive industrial district other than the very high, and that's very limited. That's the Mark Green's facility and the Cyro Steel that the council still has not finalized decision on it. So we don't know if that'll come or go yet on that. So when we looked at it, if you're going to consider it, we feel it should be in the permitted use category. And so staff gives you the ability to debate this one because you have a very specific request of reception center and you have fairly specific language that this is our industrial professional services area. Do you see reception centers interfering with these neighborhood goals? And so we provide you an option to approve with findings and an option to deny with findings based on where you think the weight of the debate should be. And that's what we were hoping to do, kick you off onto a debate.
Thank you, Corey. Thanks for teeing that up. Any questions for staff at this point before we hear from the applicant?
I have a question, Corey. So you had a minute ago the picture, the street view picture of the property there. That's the one. So on either side of this building, it looks like there's some screening or some type of fencing there, and a lot of the parking looks like it's back there behind that. Is that screening required in this case, or is that something that was?
When you have areas that you're going to store materials,
Yeah.
and so I wasn't a part of the original approval of this building, but you have to screen your materials and equipment storage areas. So my assumption in the historic past in this approval is this was used as some type of yard for storage and equipment.
So part of the reason why I asked that, I guess, is that, you know, the thought is if you're going to hold big events here, whatever, you're going to have a lot of people that are going to come and drive there. And as it is, you know, I guess the expectation would be that people would park on the east and the west sides of this building behind there, but it doesn't seem obvious that that's the parking, and so part of my concern would be that people would just be parking all up and down the streets and up in the, you know, over in the neighbors' parking lots and whatever else.
Yeah, I mean, I think your first decision is this an appropriate district to have it in, because we're not really reviewing this particular site as of yet. They're showing their intent, but we would have to look at when they came, if this were to pass, there's still the other steps of approvals that have to take place.
Okay, so that's
And
helpful too.
we would pull what those approvals consisted, what their operation is planning, and see if it meets the standards or there are amendments that need to take place to meet standards.
So that's good to understand too. That would this come back then with a site plan and everything, or? not?
It will come back with a proposal that may involve a site plan amendment, and then we would look at the approvals to see if that is a zoning administrator administrative change because they meet the ordinances, or if there is some changes or previous conditions of approval that were altered then that can only go to the planning commission. So it has a two-track possibility.
Okay, then I won't go down that road too far. I have another quick question for you, real quick, back to the staff report. In the last paragraph of page 2, additional considerations permitted versus conditional, that paragraph, you know, makes it sound like, hey, conditional, that's the way to go. And then option 1, the proposal there is permitted instead of conditional.
Yeah, we bring up the conditional process because I think it's a twofold debate. You know, reception centers, they're a nighttime use generally. I'm not going to say they don't have at weekend or some daytime uses, because they certainly do, but from my perspective, reception centers do have an evening component to them. And I just wanted to raise the issue that conditional uses can look at, if that's a concern or an impact to an area, conditional uses have the opportunity to add more to that review process than just the noise ordinance. And I know that we had an event planner on the North Business District open up, and they also held events there. And it created a few police calls to when the events were created. And so I just wanted to call a general out that, you know, you have to think about the reception center use. We allow it permitted in the CVH, so staff is kind of saying, I'm not sure industrial districts necessarily somehow create a need for CUP, because they can do it over here in another district. But I'd also want to acknowledge that just because we do it from that land use pattern, that there isn't a use concern with reception centers that we may not have in the ordinance, and that is that evening hour use, those event uses, and they take place in the evening where it could create problems for surrounding neighbors, like the event did. There were some fights breaking out, and some vandalism took place with that event planning business. But at the same time, you also put people in the evening in an industrial area where there's not as many businesses operating. And so there may be some safety concerns associated where there's an isolated use away from.
I was going to ask you if you can tell us.
So I just wanted to raise that debate.
The surrounding tenants, what's happening? Just all, I mean, I know we have they mentioned a little bit of what was nearby.
Yeah, I mean, it's
automotive and the
yeah, you have
house.
everything from, you have storage units right here in this South Business Park. This are not, yeah, these are the storage units. This is your countertop tile manufacturing business.
What about directly on the block?
Directly in the block, I'm trying to remember, this is a Interform Graphics, is that their name? They do a lot of forms and business cards. That's where we order them from. This was where Waterscape went, but they also have the lease building.
Interform just bought it.
Interform just bought it.
Getting both sides, yeah.
I know this is a contractor, I think, office, heating, HVAC in that building. This is the Lawn Butler, storage area.
What about on that block?
They're more of your office warehouse. I don't know, I can't think of businesses on the name.
I think just to the west, it's like Kitchen Essentials. They sell commercial kitchen equipment.
The street view.
One of the greatest companies in the country is just located across the street. True Golf Simulators. Right there.
Is that fun? I should take my husband there.
Oh yeah, you got $60,000. It's real fun.
Oh, never mind.
But a lot of your office warehouse, that's pretty typical.
That's helpful.
Okay, thanks.
Anything else for staff? We'll go ahead and invite the applicant to come forward at this time to.
We have one.
We have a staff report.
Well, we've got,
I have this to show some of the businesses like Baker Automotive, that you guys this.
Yeah, that's in their attachment list. Let me pull that up.
Thank you. If you'd state your name for the record, please, and
Jaden Malin. I'm a commercial real estate agent with Newmark Grove Acres Commercial Real Estate.
welcome.
And thank you. So I represent Luz Estrada. She's been in business for about 8 years. She's currently located right on Redwood Road and, is it Center Street? Cutler? 230 Cutler. In a similar area. She's right next to office users, warehouse users, and retail. It's a good mix. And she's looking to expand, and we have selected this site here in Centerville. It's a flex building, so it was originally known in, excuse me, an industrial building, loading doors, high ceilings. Then the title company came in, converted it to 100% office. So it currently lays out now, mostly open. There's a floor plan on one of the back pages. But it's mostly open where they have their cubicles for their call center and a few private offices. So it lays out as is. She could use it just like that. And she would maybe modify it a little bit. Demo out some private offices, but that would be it. And then the parking on the east and west, or that area, is where the parking would be. So when it was industrial, it was used for, I'm assuming, outside storage, yard, or trailer parking. So it's recently been repaved, repainted. So parking for the open space, the assembly area, that's where she would put the tables in, and she would make sure that the number of people, the maximum people who could occupy that assembly area, the parking would be relevant, if that makes sense. And the building's been vacant for 2 years. I don't see any type of manufacturing user buying this building because they'd have to convert it back to warehouse, where they could just go buy a building that's already warehouse, what they need with the loading. And so I honestly don't know why it's been vacant for so long, but we feel like it would be a good fit. It's away from residential rooftops, so it's not right in a residential area. Most of her events are private events that she holds. They're held at off business hours, so it would offset daytime traffic. A lot of those businesses, I don't think that they would create any problems because she'd be holding the events when they're not using, when they're at home. So I don't know if there's any questions.
What would be the hours of operation?
That would be a good question.
Most of the parties start at 5 and that's around 12, 1.
Actually, could you come up so we could get you on the record? We may have some questions directly for you as well. And you're welcome to stay as well. We can.
And again, just to preface this is just a zone text amendment for the use, so we're not talking specifically about this site. It could be any site, it could be any operation.
Right. Good point, Lisa.
Thank you.
Would you state that again?
Oh, most of my parties start at 5 and then it's around 12 or 1 in the morning, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Other questions for the applicant? Okay, thank you very much.
Thanks. Thank you.
This matter's been scheduled for public hearing. Anyone else who'd like to come and speak on this proposal, come forward at this time? Seeing no one else coming forward, I'll go ahead and close the public hearing. Further questions for staff or the applicant? I don't hear any, so discussion among commissioners. Thoughts?
So I like the fact that the use will contrast with existing use, meaning their use will be later and this use will be in the day. That does raise an interesting question as far as if there needs to be public services, if there was an emergency or a situation. I guess it wouldn't be expected, but then again, it's not like it's that much further from where it would be expected, so maybe that's not an issue, but I don't know.
I don't really see any major significant concerns with it. It's not that far away from another place where you're going to have people there late night doing big party type things at the movie theater, right? I mean,
Right.
it's not that far from the movie theater. People are there all night long, seems like. Maybe not all night long, but sometimes. Depends on the event, right? The movie. I do actually kind of going back to the concept of permitted versus conditional. And I know that there's not a one-to-one relationship between commercial high and industrial high, other than there's no relationship other than they both say high. But I know. Better find a good way to put that in the minutes. That's a good one. Anyway, it's conditional in the commercial high. And so to me, it makes sense that it would be conditional. You could make it conditional in the industrial high as well. Just to kind of, it might just be slightly out of place for a lot of industrial type of settings, but this would give you the opportunity to mitigate some of those site-specific or whatever other concerns. So, if we were to make a motion to approve it, I would like to see it be conditional rather than permitted.
Is that even a possibility at this point, though? This has been advertised as, noticed as a permitted use. Is that something that we can do without renoticing this?
I think you can. I mean, you're recommending to the city council, and so your recommendation is, and we've noticed it as an amendment to this section. And I know in the staff report it said up or down, which typically, if we're just looking at an applicant-initiated, for instance, rezone, the applicant may not want a particular zone for their property, but this is a general overall, so I do think that you could recommend something slightly different than what the applicant is requesting. It may or may not work for them, but if that's your recommendation, I do think you can do it.
I tend to, thank you, Lisa, I tend to agree with Commissioner Daley that this is enough out of the general plan guidelines for the West Centerville neighborhood that it seems to me that we ought to approach it cautiously. It doesn't necessarily mean it doesn't fit here. It very well could fit, but I think we would need to look at it from the standpoint of really seeing what the effect might be on the neighborhood, and if there are circumstances that would need to be conditioned and would warrant conditioning. I think it would be good to have that ability.
I agree. I normally don't like conditional use permits because I think when I think of them in the sense of density, it's kind of confusing. But this seems like a scenario that perhaps was the design for a conditional use permit. And so while I would discourage them in the density conversation, I think they make a lot more sense in this particular scenario and might be an effective tool to address those concerns you brought up.
Yeah, and it's primarily safety and other issues
Sure.
that may arise just because of the time of day that it's being operated
so different, yeah.
and the location.
So Corey, in the event we wanted to make that change, could we simply change, no, because it's probably a different table of uses.
No, it's the same.
Oh, it's the same, it's
Yep.
the exact same.
Yeah,
place.
you're
So
just
we
gonna,
literally
instead
just
of a
change-
P, instead of a P, it'll say C, same
Okay.
location.
Great, okay, that wouldn't be difficult then.
Put that one in
C
the
is for
minutes.
conditionally, okay.
You would just change it, if you went with this and the way it's written, reception center to IH zone matrix as a conditional use.
Any other discussion?
Well, I know that this is, based on the zone and the district, not necessarily the site, but I think that this reception center would be a great thing to bring to Centerville, and I think it would fulfill a need of that specific site being vacant for very long. So with the conditional use, that would allow that to go forward and us to still be able to mitigate any issues. So I think that's a great compromise between the need to have something and then the need to make sure that it's all done well.
And just to comment, if you went that direction, F, I set you up with E on the argument of the permitted versus conditional, but you would need to change F to make the findings that some of you have articulated.
All right, I'm prepared to make a motion if the commission will allow it. I hereby make a motion to recommend approval of the proposed zoning ordinance amendments regarding the reception center as follows. Specifically, I want to line out that Chapter 12.36, Table of Uses, allowed to add reception center to IH zone matrix as a conditional permitted use.
Conditional use.
Just conditional use, not conditional permit, okay. As a conditional use, and then I would, for the suggested reasons for actions, I would use the staff reports A through D, and then strike E and F in the staff report, and add a condition of E that the Planning Commission finds that the conditional approval process, the conditional use approval process can help mitigate the unique attributes of reception centers. With the suggested, or that was it. Amen.
I'll second that.
It's been moved and seconded. Any further comment or debate? Did we get that additional finding okay, Marcia? All right. Hearing none, let's go ahead and vote. Commissioner Wright?
Aye.
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 It is passed.
Mr. Chair, may I address the applicant?
Yes.
This will go out to a report to the City Council tomorrow morning requesting an agenda date. And you'll want to contact, can I refer to the city recorder? Marcia is our city recorder. You call the city offices and she can let you know the logistics of when, how, where, and why they finally schedule it for the City Council. So I'll send that report out. It'll head to the council. They'll do the same operation, hold the public hearing. And just for clarification, the change that the commission made is made it a conditional use permit, which is still you can still do the review process if the council approves it, but it would be approved by them to address the use.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate you coming in.
Would you like?
Yes. Do you want your packets back?
To give to the
Yeah,
city
to
council?
I have, sure.
Say hi to Lloyd for me.
Oh, Lloyd? I will. Good guy. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Okay, that moves us to item number 3 on the agenda, which is the always popular Community Development Director's Report.
Well, I'm trying to make you excited.
We're not on time, though. That's supposed to be 7:50, so you might have to.
That's my fault.
Well, I do these times and then I do it 1.5 times this, and we usually end up fairly close. As you recall, I am out of the country for your next meeting. I've worked with a number of projects and their statuses, and I think we have 3 on the table, but only 2 that are preparing to be ready to go. Legacy Crossing Storage is finalizing their information, and we have told them that we're slating them for November 9th meeting. The Ray subdivision we just met with, and we've indicated that it's likely to move to that direction with them. And so if you're not hearing any negative feedback of yet, and I will still keep in touch, we're looking to let you out of the October meeting and just use your November meeting.
And I believe that, Lisa, you're also gone that week.
Yes, I will be gone for the next 2 meetings.
Yes, and I will be gone that first meeting in November, so I think Commissioner Johnson will be chairing that. So we'll stay in touch. If something does come up, I'm happy to
Okay.
to row a little harder than normal.
Okay, if we run into some really serious consequences, we'll communicate with Chair Hershey about that.
If it does come up for that last week in October, I'm not here that whole week, so.
Oh, just, we'll be right down to, I think Commissioner Hayman also said she may have some issues this
So maybe,
A happy Halloween, no, something coming
Like,
up,
yeah.
fall break.
so at least I can share that it's not all my fault, but
Thank you.
schedules. And then we provided you the council action
Yes, and the
report.
council actions, and I am curious, you mentioned the Bowling situation. Did they take action on that?
They did, and probably by the time I got with Donna, we might not have.
I can report on that one.
Yeah, they,
Yes.
So at the last city council meeting, they did approve that Chapel Ridge amendment to the PDO. And then on the Bowling rezone, they denied the request to residential high. And so the applicant has requested that the council reconsider that, so we're actually putting it on the next agenda for them to reconsider, to possibly go to RM. The applicant wasn't ready at that time to, because whatever it goes to, that was what we were saying is up or down, because it's the applicant's property that's being rezoned, and he may want to keep it commercial if he doesn't get the zoning that was requested, but he has requested a reconsideration for RM, and that will be going next Tuesday.
Okay. All right, and as I recall, that had a change of what, 1 unit between the RH?
I think so.
Yeah.
Based on the size of the lot?
That's the estimate, the exact
you're in
numbers.
the
Staff
report.
hasn't run the exact numbers, but yeah.
Feels good to win one every once in a while.
All right, well, very good, thank you. Anything else that we need to have brought to our attention, Corey or Lisa, at this point?
No, I recommended to the city manager a replacement, and he'll be verifying that recommendation on Monday. So we should have potentially someone on board fairly soon, given whatever notice that they have to give. What was the other thing? I have not heard anything back on an appointment of a new commissioner yet.
No, the council hasn't acted on that, perhaps next Tuesday.
just make sure that whoever it is has a last name that's after W. So I like being this far in. It's kind of nice.
I don't know if that dictates.
Because I don't want to
it,
be on the
though.
end
Well, when you
anymore.
get elected
Now that
chair-
I know what it's like to be in the middle, it's
You
like,
get elected chair in December, you
no
sit right
thanks,
here.
no thanks.
You can request to change positions.
Oh, I'm teasing, it's fine.
The council does that. I keep them in the same position.
That might be too complex for the rest of my commissioners.
Well,
here.
I might request, but I think me and Logan need some separation.
We're getting a little close over here.
Yeah,
A little conflict of interest here.
Good.
What about me?
Lisa,
Poor Lisa.
he has to sit by me all the time.
Well, I'm going to move we adjourn.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Man. It was a double.